let me tell you about the deal with Swing University. I'm looking to save you some money. I'm Phil Schaap. I'm the curator of jazz at Lincoln Center and the academic head of our school for listening. It's for fun. It is fun. Swing University. So how am I going to save you some money? Well, we have these 3 courses. Jazz 101. Then there's an intermediary. 101 is the introduction. And the intermediary school course is 201. And then we get really intensive, and that's 301. But, you know, you don't have to take those courses. Just take this fast lesson with me. The first lesson is the new world is a myriad of hybrid cultures combining differently Africa and Western Europe. It comes out different every place. And if you think about it, think about South America. Brazil, they speak Portuguese. The other countries, it's largely Spanish, right? Portuguese haven't been in Brazil for centuries. And likewise, Spain in the other countries, at least a couple hundred years anyway. Yet it's there. And so is Africa. So you have these hybrids. Well, there's a unique one called jazz. It's a musical one. It's from New Orleans. How could such a big thing come from this little place? New Orleans. Well, think about the island of Hispaniola. It's a fairly sizable island. 2 countries. The Dominican Republic, Spanish, Haiti, French. It's a small place. So a small place can have a huge culture that can represent colonial years so long ago. And New Orleans is the most unique. I know that's not good usage. It's unique. So, New Orleans. It's French, it's Spanish, it's English. It is the largest port in the southern United States. That's pretty much been true since 1718, not that we were the United States yet. And it's also got this river that feeds into it called the Mississippi, goes all the way up to Minnesota, all the way down to Louisiana and into the Gulf of Mexico. So you got the river feeding everything from the interior, and you've got the ocean port that will let anything anywhere get to you. New Orleans is a gumbo that matches New York City's melting pot.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome.
Good evening. Welcome to Flushing Town Hall. Thank you all for being here tonight. I'm glad we all got a little taste of Mr. Phil Schaap. Charming as always. It's a very special evening tonight. I first want to acknowledge that we are on the traditional lands of the Matinecock people, the first people of Flushing, Queens, one of the first tribes of New York, and we honor their elders who have continued to steward this land throughout generations. Flushing Town Hall is a 160-year-old building. We just turned 160 this year. Actually, about a week and a half ago, the cornerstone was laid, June 7th of 1862. And we're really honored to be stewards of this building, which is owned by the City of New York. So we owe a big thanks to the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs for their support, the New York City Council, the National Endowment for the Arts, the New York State Council on the Arts, the Howard Gilman Foundation, the Fan Fox and Leslie R. Samuels Foundation, our board of directors, our members. We got members in the house? Thank you all for coming back. I'm not going to say too much more now because we have a lot of people who are going to talk about this program. I just want to say we here at Flushing Town Hall are tremendously grateful that the Queen's Jazz Orchestra lives on. We had the deaths of well, many people over the last few years, but 2 giants of jazz, Mr. Jimmy Heath and Mr. Phil Schaap. And we're lucky that Jimmy Heath passed the baton of the Queen's Jazz Orchestra, which he founded in 2008 here at Flushing Town Hall. He passed the baton to his protege, Antonio Hart, who is doing a fantastic job. And I'm going to pass it on now to Clyde to introduce some of our other guests and the program. Thank you all for being here.
I will.
Oh, one more thing.
Okay, go ahead.
We are going to have an intermission. Concessions are in there. Bathrooms are back there.
Oh, yeah.
So feel free, if you didn't get concessions before, to check out the concessions during intermission.
Okay, first of all, I want to say that this is our first full concert of the Queen's Jazz Orchestra since COVID. I wanted to also say that there probably isn't a person in this theater who hasn't been touched by Phil Schaap's words, wisdom, and his music. And we wanted to honor him because he also lived at 8663 Cleo Street in Hollis, Queens. So he always came to our shows here, and he always promoted our shows. Without Phil Schaap, many of the shows you've seen, you might have known about. He was probably one of the most enlightened men on the East Coast in terms of jazz history, for chronology, and the pantheon of jazz writers, historians, and even musicians. Phil Schaap stands at the top. And so I could go on and on about my relationship, but I know you came to hear the music, and he was about the music. He called the music the gospel. And if you kept preaching the gospel, you were on his side. So before we begin the music, I'd like to bring up his long-term partner, who knows a lot about his life. They spent a lot of time together, Miss Susan Schaefer.
Thank you so much, and thank you actually so much for sharing the history and acknowledging the people who were here first. I work with universities and nonprofits, and I'd hear a lot of talks like that, and only in New York State and Massachusetts have I recently, and Vermont actually, heard people kind of start talking about their places in that way, and I found it just amazing. So thank you for doing that. So I'm Susan Schaefer. And as I was thinking about what I was going to say tonight, I actually bothered to think about the calendar and realized that about 18 years ago, right now, like if I could have searched Google Gmail better today, I might have actually said, oh, it was tomorrow, but that search feature is not great. But I got an email from a dear friend of mine who I had worked with and gone to business school with at NYU, asking if I was interested in going on a blind date. A friend of hers worked at Jazz at Lincoln Center and wanted to set up her colleague, Phil. Phil's only requirement was that the person be smart. So flatteringly enough, my friend thought of me. And she advertised him by saying, I think he's older. He sounds pretty cool and interesting. Here's a picture. I think it's old. And it was from like 1983. And this was, 2004. So I thought, well, let me just Google this man before I say yes. See what he looks like now. Not that that's the most important thing, but I did and found myself at the Jazz at Lincoln Center website, which had a lovely bio with Phil, saying when he was born, which was, considered a number of years before I was, and I was like, that's cool, I'm fine with that. I found appealing, actually. Talked about his parents and his history, and I thought he sounded fascinating. Had a bunch of Grammys. That's great. And then I saw his picture, and I looked at his smile, and the first thing that popped in my head was, that's a smile that I could look at forever. And I did not expect to think that, right, sitting in my living room on 87th Street, Googling this stranger, and looked at his, he had nice curly hair, hazel eyes. These are things that I liked in men. So, showed up 2 weeks later, actually on the day his parents got married. Met him in Penn Station, where he took me not to a fabulous New York City jazz event, but to the Cornerstone in Metuchen, New Jersey, where some of his friends were playing. And we hit it off well enough to have a second date, which was at closer to home at a really, really divey bar by Columbia, which was owned by his friend from the West End, Brian Flanagan, if any of y'all knew Brian. Home to a vicious trivia contest where we won first place in the first round and second place in the second round. I was kind enough to let Phil answer a few of the questions to make him feel good about himself, not being very smart himself. And at that point, we had a great time, and we pretty much kept having a great time until the end. We are probably the only people who are in the ER at Mount Sinai at 4 o'clock in the morning playing trivia games together, listening to the rest of the people who have come into Mount Sinai at 4 in the morning, which is quite a mixed crowd. Everyone else tonight will talk about Phil's love of jazz, and I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to remind you of some of the other parts of Phil's life briefly. Phil did not just love jazz, although he loved jazz pretty much above anything else. He loved excellence, and excellence in all types of music. And I have seen Phil cry at John Cipollina and the Quicksilver Messenger Service, if y'all know the 50s rocker Eddie Cochran, with a heartbreaking story himself, but I have watched Eddie Cochran at Town Hall Party on a bootleg CD probably 1,000 times, and I think Phil cried every single time. I've also seen him cry at the Kenny Rogers Geico commercial, not because Kenny still sang so well, but because he still had a great sense of timing. And Phil, certainly appreciated, in any skill like that. Phil was crazy for sports, particularly the Rangers and the Mets and any team playing against Columbia University. And he loved politics, American history, the Constitution, honesty, truth, equality. He had no tolerance for lies and bullshit. And I can tell you that a few weeks ago, a few weeks ago, I was watching, actually a week ago, Thursday, the Rangers in the playoffs and the January 6th hearings. Now, Phil was not a huge television watcher, though he could get sucked into a Law and Order marathon with the best of us. But he watched a lot of TV sports, political talk shows, PBS News, especially Friday nights, C-SPAN. You kind of get my drift, right, what we're talking about. And he was a sucker for old movies, particularly old movies that had his friends, his jazz friends in them. So I have seen a lot of old jazz movies, or old movies with jazz musicians in them, but don't ask me the plot, because we only watch the parts with the musicians. Phil was a terrible channel flipper. And unfortunately, because he had pterodactyl arms and was really fast, he always controlled the remote control in our house. So I was thinking as I was watching this last Thursday night, how much I missed Phil to have to give commentary, to answer questions that I might have about something, just to kind of banter back and forth with. And while I was flipping between, the Rangers and the January 6th hearings, and I thought to myself, if only there were a movie with Louis Armstrong in it on another channel, this would be like the Phil Schaap trifecta of television, and that he would have probably exploded the remote control, flipping back and forth between the three. So I don't necessarily want you to take home with you tonight a vision of Phil maniacally switching between channels, but really that he was a man with a much bigger life than just jazz, who was loved by friends and family, his family on his mother Marjorie's side, and on his father Walter's side. Having gotten to know all of those people, I can tell you there is not I don't want to say not a dunce in the bunch, but everyone in in those two families are just full of, they're remarkably successful, they're fantastic storytellers and entertainers. If they're not a musician, they've written a book, or they're performing live on stage as an actor somewhere. I mean, they're all amazing. And so he was a person who did have a very full life outside of jazz. And for those of you who may have only seen him as a professor, especially if you were a Juilliard student, you might not realize that he was an incredibly silly and fun man. I have heard him teach his Zoom classes to his Juilliard students, because I was on the other side of the wall working, and he walked in one Friday afternoon, and I was like, what are you doing to these people? My God, you were yelling at them for 45 minutes. And he would say, well, that's nothing what Joe Jones did to me. Okay. Okay, not my business. So anyway, what I really just want you to take away tonight is, as I said, that Phil was a man with a very full life, mostly jazz, but not all. And if you can just have a sense of his respect for the things he loved about the United States, about music, about honesty, and carry those things forward in your own lives and in any teachings you have, as he would say. He wanted to, teach it and pass it on. So with that, thank you. Nice to meet you all, even though I can't really see you.
Has everybody here listened to WBGO radio? Now I'm about to bring up the co-founder of WBGO Radio with Bob Ottenhoff. I'd like Miss Dorothy Ann Kirk to come forth and say a little bit about Mr. Schaap. Come on up. She has promoted many of our shows, all the shows we've done at Flushing Town Hall. Here's Miss Dorothy Ann Kirk.
I've written some remarks, so maybe I can just, we can work it out. No problem. Good evening. Good evening. And as I always say when I make remarks, bright moments. Oh, thank you very much. Okay. Number one, I'm honored to be here. Thanks to Town Hall for inviting me. Many years ago, when I was working for WBGO, I produced a WBGO children's concert series, and one of them was actually held here in the hall. Also, several years ago, Town Hall honored me. So when I got call from Clyde, never mind my relationship with Phil, I just couldn't say no. So I'm going to share a few remarks with you. I first met Phil Schaap at a recording session of Rahsaan Roland Kirk in 1972. At that time, I was just being introduced to the New York jazz scene, but little did I know, later, our lives would really parallel in the years to come. WBGO first went on the air in 1979. I was the third person hired, and much to my surprise, and to this day, it still amazes me. Phil was one of the on-air announcers hired very early on, and that's when our relationship began. Phil had many interests beyond music, and WBGO, being a small, family-oriented organization, the announcers formed a basketball team for a very short period of time, and Phil was part of it. Did you know that? Yes. He eventually left WBGO, and in 1987, Phil, along with other KCR announcers, one being Sharif, who you will hear from later, organized a tribute to Rahsaan Roland Kirk. That was from Wednesday through Sunday, and that was truly a marathon event. Some of the participants were Joel Dorn, longtime record producer for Atlantic Records, Andy Kirk, myself, and too many others to name. We stayed connected on and off over the years, and I would check on him from time to time after he became ill. I was one of the people that if I had a question on jazz, who were you gonna call? And it was Phil Schaap. He was sure to have the answer because he was a walking encyclopedia of jazz, and all of you know that. So in 2020, during the pandemic, I was asked to participate in several events on Zoom. So I was preparing for one of the events, and I had a question. Who did I call? Phil Schaap. Guess what? He did not have my answer, and that's the honest truth. That had to be a rarity. So I went on the internet I finally found my answer, and when I got it, I called Phil back, told him who it was. He's like, oh yeah, but in all fairness to him, the artist that I was asking him about was during my life when I lived in Los Angeles, California, and he just didn't know about it. In 2020, I was named a NEA Jazz Master, and in 21, Phil received the same honor. There was one person, Steve Robinson, that worked with Phil, at WBGO along with myself and others. And I talked to Steve and told him I would be here. So I would just like to share with you one of Phil's last projects. It hasn't been scheduled yet, but I will give you just a little bit of information about it. The series is 13 one-hour documentary programs that explores the many sides of the genius of Billie Holiday and her impact on the music of her time and ours. The title is No Regrets, the music and spirit of Billie Holiday. And here's a little bit of information that Steve gave me that involves Phil. And as soon as I get this next page, I will share it with you. It won't? Okay. There we go. Thanks, Susan. Okay. This is what Phil said. This is what Steve said. Phil gave us 2 interviews for the series, No Regrets, the music and spirit of Billie Holiday. He did this while he was fighting his illness, but his comments were just what you'd expect from Phil: incisive, informed, articulate, and passionate. This is one quote from Phil that will be in the series. As I said, it hasn't been scheduled yet. So this is a quote from Phil. He said, well, my parents took me to the Randall's Island Jazz Festival in 1956. In 1956, I was 5. It was summertime, so the sun goes down late, and then Billie Holiday came on stage, and even though I was a child, I knew who she was and that she was a very big deal in our household. And regardless of how much I remember it would be, if you will, a very childish recollection, but I do recall the spotlight hitting the gardenia, and that's my primary recollection of it, but I know I was happy I was there. So again, bright moments, and please put your hands together for the Queen's Jazz Orchestra, conducted by Grammy Award nominated Antonio Hart.
I think they think I'm Master Heath with this little bit of space. I'm a little bigger. That wasn't funny, huh? Okay. Well, anyway, good evening. How are you guys doing? So we haven't really been here for a couple years, and we're here, we're live. So let me ask you again, how are we doing this evening? We're so excited. It's a little bittersweet not having the master here with us physically, but he's here with us spiritually always. So we're going to continue with what he started, and we're going to keep it going. And we're very excited to be honoring Phil Schaap and the Grandmaster Charlie Parker this evening, as well as some of the music from Master Heath. And I'm going to just tell you a short story, my connection with Phil Schaap, and then we're going to get to the music. I was talking to Steve Davis how every morning we would wake up and listen to Phil Schaap. You know, that was like my alarm clock. And one morning, he was playing some early Charlie Parker when he was like a teenager, practicing. And I jumped out of my bed, and I was like, what the heck was this? So I looked for the phone number, and I said, Phil, what was that? He said, yeah, San Antonio was, Charlie Parker when he was 17 years old. I said, that was so amazing, man. I would love to hear it again. So time went on. My birthday's on September 30th. On September 30th, he sent me a cassette of that recording. And you guys know what cassettes are, right? Right? And that's one of my diamonds. I still have that recording, and I always thank them for first, I was like, how did you know my birthday, for thinking about me and sending that to me? But anyway, enough of that. We're going to start out with a composition by Charlie Parker. It's arranged by Master Jimmy Heath. And it's entitled Yardbird Suite.
Yeah. Yardbird Suite, arranged by Jimmy Heath. We had Steve Davis on the trombone. Michael Philip Mossman on the trumpet. David De Jesus on the alto saxophone. Mr. Sam Dillon on the tenor. And one of the original Heath brothers, Mr. Jeff Patton on the piano. All right, let's keep it going. We're going to continue with the composition, another Charlie Parker composition. I hate when they say tunes. It's like when you talk about European classical music, this composition, they say jazz tune. No, it's a composition. So we're going to continue with the composition by Charlie Parker entitled Moose the Mooch. And it's arranged by Michael Philip Mossman. Michael Philip Mossman. Solo on alto sax, lead alto, Mark Gross. Mr. Bobby Lavelle. I ask him how he does this. It's every time he plays a perfect solo, it reminds me of Al Gray. It's like just a perfect solo every time. Stevie D, Steve Davis. And Master Heath said this young man never played a wrong note, and I believe it. Mr. David Wong. All right, let's keep going. We're going to do another arrangement by Michael Philip Mossman, and this is entitled "The Song Is You." This is hard. Master, he made it look very easy. Here we go. Michael Philip Mossman. Let's try that again. Michael Philip Mossman.
Antonio Hart.
I've known this guy since I was 14 years old. We went to high school together. We went to college together. We played the same fraternity. And one of my oldest friends in the world, Mark Gross. Baltimore School for the Arts. So, guys, I want to change it up a little bit. Let's get out of the music. We're going to play something that's associated with Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie. How about we play Hot House? Is that cool? All right. You guys know Hot House? All right. We're going to have a little jam session for a second. How about 8 minutes out front? 1, 2, All right, thank you. So we're going to take a short break. We're going to come back with some more music. You guys enjoying yourselves? I do not believe you. Are you enjoying yourselves? Okay, feels better now. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
We're about to get started with the second half of the program. We're just going to have a few more sharing of stuff about Phil Schaap. Wasn't the Queen's Jazz Orchestra amazing tonight? They actually, Antonio brought a sextet for us, which was their first live program exactly a year ago. So we are really grateful for the continuity of that ensemble and these musicians to grace our stage again and again. So Phil Schaap, I have some of his students and proteges here with me. I myself was briefly a student of Phil Schaap. And I just wanted to say a word and then pass it on to some of his other students and friends. I had the good fortune to start catching bird flight in the mornings like some other folks. And once I heard like one episode, you know, bird flight's one of those shows that you either hate it or you love it. And, you know, a lot of people don't like to hear Phil Schaap droning on. But for those of us who do, the moment you hear it, you're like, oh, there's something missing in my life. So I had the good fortune to do that, and then I got the chance to take his Jazz 301 course that he advertised at the beginning of the show. And I don't want to say too much because I'm not as close to him as these other folks, but I do want to say that Suzanne was talking about Phil's love of excellence in general and music beyond jazz. And I'm not a jazz musician, I'm an Arab musician. I'm very interested in a totally different kind of music, some of you know me as that. And even though I wasn't a jazz musician, I've never been, like, jazz isn't the main music, Phil taught me one of the most important music lessons of my life, which is that the music itself is the gospel. On Bird Flight, Phil would play the same song 7 times in a row. And he'd play the same 15 seconds of a song over and over again. And in fact, I just heard a replay of Bird Flight a couple months ago from back in 2016 or something, where he played Charlie Parker saying the phrase, my constituent, to refer to Dizzy Gillespie at the Jazz at Massey Hall concert. And he played that phrase just to hear where the cut was, probably 45 times. And my daughter was in the car, was like, remembers that phrase. But for Phil, everything was in the music itself. Even though he talked a lot about it, and he could say anything, it was the sound itself. And he really wanted you to listen to it, and he understood that the art of music was carried by the practitioners. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of music theory, there's a lot of people who think about describing music and what it is. And Phil would just say how they do the rhythm exactly, that's what it is. It comes from oral tradition, it comes from Africa, it comes from the individuals who made it. He wanted you to hear what they were doing even more than what he said about it. And for me, as I said, someone who's involved in another tradition of music, the idea of oral tradition and of the knowledge of the musicians being paramount and of the substance of the music being the gospel itself, that's absolutely true for me in the music that I do. I think that that's true universally of music. And so for me, Phil Schaap is like not only one of the great geniuses of jazz music, he's one of the great geniuses of music overall, his understanding of what music was. I have with me here Phil Schaap, in addition to being the great genius who educated all of us on jazz, was constantly wanting to bring the younger generations along. He taught, obviously, as you heard, at Juilliard, at Jazz at Lincoln Center, and at KCR, where he had young proteges who, so which one of you guys want to come speak? You all three want to come and speak? A couple of you guys want to come and speak? You guys can all come together or whatever. introduce yourselves and say a few words about Phil.
Thanks, everybody. I'm David. This is Parker. That's Matthew. We all had the good fortune of learning from Phil and kind of being under his wing at WKCR for just under a decade for me and Matthew, and a little over a decade probably for Parker. And I don't have much to say that hasn't already been said about Phil, but I think when I reflect on him and think about him, it's a number of things for me. It's the union of raw passion. It's the encyclopedic knowledge, but not just the encyclopedic knowledge, the ability to synthesize that in a kind of broad historical understanding. It's the political commitment and his knowledge of the country, as Susan was talking about earlier. It's his pedagogical skill and his ability to just motivate and get our motors going. And I think, to what Sammy was saying just now, it's something that's not remarked on often enough with Phil. It's his ability to communicate fundamental musical concepts was really just important to me personally, and his explanations of song form, of time signature, and connecting them to specific recordings in jazz history throughout decades of jazz history was just extremely important for me. So that's what I have to say, and I'll pass it on to Parker.
Hi. I'll also keep my remarks brief, but yeah, just Phil Schaap, the teacher, a brilliant mind, and he had he'd perfected this way of teaching, and Bird Flight was an excellent example of that. It's like this long form epic that's evolving, and you double back and you listen to it 45 times because you're going to really get it the more you listen to it. And we might leave that chapter but go back to it later, and then we're going to listen to every version of Hot House from across Charlie Parker's career. And I was a beneficiary of the Phil Schaap School, which was remarkable. Not just, he demanded excellence, he didn't suffer fools, but if you showed the least bit of interest, he just, as rooted as he was in the past, he was deeply invested in the future. And it didn't have to be jazz at WKCR, it could be anything. He'd connect with anyone programming any kind of music, or the culture programs, the news programs. It was just, if you were invested and showed a spark of curiosity, he wanted to nurture that. And so, thank you, Phil. And I just was gonna say, Phil was fond of saying that all music is present tense when it's being played or listened to. And so I think, what better way could we honor him than by turning out tonight? And we just, he would also, though, say, this is not enough. We all need to go and tell all of our friends and get them here on a nightly basis to clubs around the city, because that's the only way that the music keeps going. So please tell your friends and keep coming back.
Hi, I'm Matthew Rivera, and Phil gave me the nickname the Fat Cat, which he would scream anytime he saw me, he would scream that at me, Fat Cat. But I had the tremendous pleasure of knowing Phil probably for the shortest time of maybe anyone in this room. I don't know, it was about 7 years that I knew him, and yet I knew him at a moment in my life when his impact was probably the most meaningful. And really it was thanks to this music, first and foremost, that brought me to Phil, and then Phil who opened the door to this music. And it was an extremely special relationship, which I think most fondly of on the many trips that I took with him to his class at Juilliard, which I heard Susan talking about, that she overheard on Zoom. But I was at some of those in-person classes before COVID. And Phil was, to say the least, he was harsh. He had his own way of teaching, and I've never seen anyone else teach like he taught. He was really an incredible lecturer. He didn't have notes in front of him ever. He spoke from the heart and from his mind. And whenever he came into class, he always came in with a question, such as, on Jelly Roll Morton's Mamie's Blues, what is the condition of Mamie's feet? All of the students would have nothing to say. And he would say, her feet were soaking wet. And then he would look up at the ceiling and say, you were right, Ma. I wasted my life. I wasted it all. You know, he'd go on this. Or sometimes he'd go out to the door. He'd open up the door to the hallway of all of Juilliard and yell, bartender, bartender, get me a double bourbon. I remember when a student, he asked someone who Earl Hines was, the obviously great jazz pianist, maybe one of the very greatest. And they said, and that guy who died with Charlie Parker in a car accident in 1936. And Phil liked that one a lot. He would call me up with that, leaving it on voicemails. We even talked about that all the time. So Phil would, you know, and he just berated students about these stories. And, you know, but as David and Parker were saying, if you showed interest in the music, he opened everything to you. And it was really remarkable where he could take the music. He was not above getting in arguments about, you know, where the trumpet breaks are split between Red Allen and Louis Armstrong on I Ain't Got Nobody from 1929. And, you know, he would make it personal. He was not above making it personal. And that could be hard sometimes, but for him, the music was personal. And that really was the lesson that I think I learned most from Phil, that the music was personal. And the music is indeed the gospel. So I just want to, on behalf of the 3 representatives of Phil's students here, just say thank you to Flushing Town Hall and to the presently empty seats, but soon to be filled, of the Queen's Jazz Orchestra. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one more special guest, Phil's longtime friend and colleague at WKCR, the great Mr. Sharif Abdul Salam.
Thank you very much. I met Phil Schaap in August of 1969. We were both 3 years old. No. We were both freshmen at Columbia University, but we did not meet at WKCR. We met at football tryouts at Baker Field. Phil was an athlete, amongst other things. Phil wanted to be a tight end on the football team. Phil did not become a tight end on the football team. And I think that was fantastic, because it gave him more time to deal with the music. I met Phil. We were both city kids. I'm from the Bronx, he's from Queens, and we kind of hit it off. And we went through the season, and I said, let me go by KCR. You know, maybe I might want to get involved. And I went by KCR. I said, hey, Phil, how you doing? He said, I'm doing fine. And he said, why are you here? I said, I'm here to do R&B, brother. Mr. Motown, you know? The sound of Philadelphia, that was my stuff. He said, really? Little did I know that Phil knew all about that too. I eventually found out. But Phil and I developed a friendship that I am thankful for. It's kind of hard to believe sometimes when I think about Phil. You know, you just make a phone call, talk to Phil about any number of things. And Phil was always ready to work with you, help you, see what he can do for you. And that's what I want to talk about you tonight. We all know about all the different things that he knows and how he teaches. I mean, we could talk forever, as Phil sometimes did, about this music, the importance of the music. You must understand that Phil Schaap was a very honest individual, as Susan mentioned, great integrity, but he was also extremely sensitive, which kind of at times surprised me, but as I got to know him, he felt things dearly. Sometimes Phil would be slighted by ignorant people, and sometimes it would bother him. And I say, Phil, man, don't worry about that person. Then you get the other people who think they know more than Phil Schaap. Oh, what fools they were. Being with Phil sometimes, people would say, oh, you're Phil Schaap. And Phil was like, oh boy, here we go again. And they would, of course, have some kind of question. And as he got older, he learned how to, I think, be kinder to people, because he could turn you around in a second, have you on your way. But he became a bit more mellow as he aged, which was good, because what he wanted to do was to share what he had been blessed with. His whole focus was on making sure that you could have some of what he had. Understand that Phil Schaap did I don't know how many different radio programs, not Bird Flight, Traditions in Swing, Out to Lunch, the birthday broadcast, the memorial broadcast, and all these broadcasts. Here was the situation. If Phil Schaap was not on your radio was not on, because Phil was always on the air. And we all got those big paychecks of $0, all on a volunteer basis. I would tell people, Phil, we're all volunteers. He said, get out of here. That guy spends a lifetime at the station sharing the music with us. Yeah, and he does it because he feels it's important. It's in his heart. And Papa Joe Jones told him that he needed to pass it on. Phil took that to heart. And that's what he was really all about, was trying to pass it on. Phil, you also need to understand, as I said, he was an athlete. Don't let him drive the bass line. He was an excellent basketball player. And we would often play different places, and we'd go places. And they're like, wait a minute, you're the guys on the radio. We didn't know you could play ball. I said, well, hey, you never know. But that was years ago when we were a lot younger. But Phil played basketball up until early 60s. He'd tell me how many times he'd go to the gym. And I would say, real? That's great, Phil. But Phil had a love for this music. He had a love for musicians. That's one of the first things that knocked me out about Phil. When Phil was presenting music at the West End in Manhattan, here are musicians at least twice as old as he is, sometimes, and he's 3 times as old. But he knew and understood how important for these gentlemen to continue to play and to share with each other the importance of this music, the hoops he went through to make sure this happened. That's another side of Phil Schaap. Giving, sharing, without regard to the hassle he had to go through. Sometimes he would tell me about different situations, and I would just shake my head. You did that? You did that? Yeah, but that's how I had to do this in order for this to happen. And it was just amazing. I loved him as a brother, and we shared quite a bit. A wonderful individual, a special individual, and I just wish, I could talk for hours about how important he was to me as an individual, but he was to everyone. And to see you here tonight, I think is important and special, because Phil always felt he needed to do more. But I know towards the end, he said, Sharif, you and those who have come behind me, you are going to be responsible for finishing this work. He talked about Papa Joe Jones, how he'd get yelled at. But Papa Joe Jones always told him to pass it on. Don't keep what you have locked up. Share it, as Phil did, as often as he could. But he told me personally, he said, Sharif, he said, man, you come on Thursday, keep playing John Coltrane every Thursday night at 6 o'clock, no matter what. And I said, yes, sir. But all he was saying was, look, we who love this music, or say we love this music, who care about this music, and the importance of this music, we all have that responsibility. All of us, whether we're new at this or just getting into the music, we have to, each one teach one, share with our friends, our relatives, our enemies, whoever it is, share the music with them. It is so important for this music to continue. Because without our efforts, we have these great musicians that come and play. That's wonderful. But we, on a very personal level, need to talk to someone else or share with someone else what you say you like and what you say is important and what you say this music has that healing power. We, all of us, those who are here tonight, those who are not here tonight, have to continue the work that Phil has. He didn't start it, but he brought us a long way along the road. So I would ask each of you, make your own personal commitment to share this music and your love of this music with someone else who may not have it the way you do, especially our young people. I mean, if I look at the average age in this room, we're all kind of up there, wouldn't you say? All that means is there's many, many other folks who need to be exposed to what we say we love. And if we do say we love this music known as jazz, we have a lot of work to do.
Can we open up the floor to a question or two about Phil? Can we open up the floor to a question or two about Phil?
He has a question he'd like to ask.
About Phil?
Have I gone too long? I've gone too long already.
Well, the musicians are really anxious to get played.
One question.
One question. You need that art that can happen in the vacuum with that bebop music like bebop. And it's based upon chord changes from Broadway tunes and film music, right? You need that art that can happen in the vacuum. You talk about how Phil was passionate about other art forms and how that came into his fold in his jazz.
Very quickly, Phil was passionate about everything. Not only music. And Phil, for instance, he was a big sports fan, as Susan said. I remember when we first started talking to Phil, he was a big baseball fan. You know, I forgot which team it was. I don't think he was the Mets. I'm sorry. He just knows so much about everything. But somebody like Phil, and just so casually, would know the batting average of every player on the team, would know how many innings pitched by. It was just, you know, it's just phenomenal.
How about performing arts, particularly like theater or like film?
Well, I'll say this about Phil. Art is art. Phil loved art. Paintings, photographs, all of that, because he said it's all one. And we should see it as all one. So the music piece is just a music piece. But to be around a human being, there are other things we have to deal with. And he was also passionate about that.
Who are some of the cats?
Well, we can talk maybe another time. I got to get this back to Sam. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharif. And now for the music. Please give it up one more time for the Queen's Jazz Orchestra. And Mr. Antonio Hart, who's honoring us by filling the big shoes left behind by Master Jimmy Heath, who we also remember. Thank you all for being here tonight.
Alabama. That was an arrangement of mine. And we're going to continue now with another composition that I wrote many, many years ago for Mark Gross's first son, Mark Gross Jr. And this is entitled Like My Own. We need some help with this. Can you help us out? We back to that again? We need some help. Can you help us out? Are you sure? You know, because I've played this in Europe, I've played this in Asia, and as soon as I turn that phone off, and when I ask people to do this, they're ready to jump in. And I come to America, the home of this music. Yes. No. Yes. So you help us out? Yes. There we go. Thank you very much. Let's see. We're going to go into the book of Master Heath now. And he always talked about togetherness. You know, the world is always trying to separate people. We got a lot of things going on politically that's separating people, things around the world. And Mr. Heath was a firm believer of just people being together, different nationalities, different beliefs, different everything. Because we're all human, and we all want to be happy. So this is a composition that he wrote, and we have to play this every night because it's part of the spirit of togetherness. So, togetherness. One, two, Wow. We had a young man soloing on the trumpet. I just met him tonight, and he's a brilliant musician. I mean, he came in, sight read everything perfectly, and he can solo. And as Doug says, he's a really nice guy. How about a hand for Mr. Nathan Eklund on the trumpet? Mr. Mark Gross on the alto saxophone. I've known this guy for so many years. I remember you were at Duke then, right? At Duke University, so he's an intellect too. But brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. There's not so much I can say about him besides he's just amazing. Mr. Jed Patton on the piano. I'm so sorry, brother. Your solo was killing. Did I? Oh, did I skip? It doesn't matter. You both were killing. Mr. Scott Winhall on the trumpet. I was doing good. I have to mess up at some point today. But anyway, we're going to continue with one of my favorite compositions of Master Heath's. Like, I could hear this every night. And I would beg him to play it every night. All right, Antonio, you really like that? And I'm like, yes, sir. And he wrote this for his mentor. And you can hear all the love in this chart. You can hear the influence. You can hear all the spirit. And actually, all of Master Heath's music is like that. It's just full of love and just spirit of the people that he was writing for. And that's why his music is going to last forever. And we're going to make sure that it lasts. So we're going to continue with the composition entitled Without You, No Me. Dedicated to Dizzy. One, two, three, four. Let me introduce the members of the orchestra. On the tenor, Mr. Bobby Lavelle. On alto, Mr. David De Jesus. I'm really not feeling that. Let's try this again. On the tenor, Mr. Bobby Lavelle. On the alto, Mr. David De Jesus. Mr. Mark Gross on the alto. Sam Dillon on the tenor. Jay Bradford on the baritone. Steve Davis on the trombone. John Mosca on the trombone. James Burton on the trombone. Douglas Provines on the trombone. Brandon Lee on the trumpet. Nathan Eklund on the trumpet. Scott Winhope on the trumpet. Michael Philip Mossman on the trumpet. Mr. Evan Sherman on the drums. Mr. David Wong on the bass. Mr. Jeff Patton on the piano. With the Queen's Jazz Orchestra. Thank you very much. I think everybody on this bandstand is remembering Master Heath. All of us are connected to him in some way. We want to thank everybody here at Flushing Town Hall for giving us a place to play, an opportunity to play, to fellowship and be back together again, and especially Clyde. Where's he at? Clyde Bullard. If he's still here. This gentleman works so hard at promoting this music, keeping this orchestra working, but he does a lot of stuff all year round. But he's working behind the scenes, doing as much as he can to keep this music alive, keeping this place alive. And you know, whenever you hear his name, he's promoting something, please support him. Please continue to support this place. We need these places to play. You know, it's nice to go around the world and play, but we much rather play for you. We want to be home. I think we're going to do one more. Is that okay? They don't want it. They don't want it.
They're not happy.
You know, I always tell people, I said, this is not jazz at Lincoln Center. This is not, you know, they swing in there for sure. But, you know, I'm not talking about being all stiff. This is home. This is party. You're supposed to be having a good time, right? All right, we're going to do one more. And that's from Master Heath, one of his most famous compositions. And we're just going to have what he used to call Friendly Fire. And this composition is titled Gingerbread Boy.
We need 2 measures of 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
Thank you very much. Get home safe. Blessings to everybody. Thank you.